So welcome to Psychology on Demand. I'm really excited today to have Alex Vesely here, the film creator and psychotherapist, and grandson of Victor Frankl, the famous theorist and psychotherapist himself. Excellent to have you here. Really excited. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Yeah, glad to have you here. Today, I just really wanted to know a little bit about the man himself, about Viktor Frankl, about his influence in your life, and about your journey. What's been your search for meaning,
Mhm.
and how have you kind of grown from those teachings? So if that sounds okay for you today, I thought maybe we could discuss some of those kind of things.
I'd be happy to. Yeah.
So,
Well, growing up as the grandson of Viktor Frankl, looking back, I just consider that a privilege because he was an extraordinary man. He was a deep thinker. He usually said, "I'm not such a genius. I just like to think things to the end and come to a logical conclusion." That seemed to really have been one of his main character traits. He was a truth seeker. He tried to teach and when you were around him, he wanted you to benefit from um, his knowledge and his insights. And he did that whether in the function of a therapist or if you were just family. He would always do that, and oftentimes that also meant just making you feel good by entertaining you with a joke. So it was just fun to be around him, and you would either walk away smarter or you had a good laugh. And I think that's something that a lot of people are surprised when I tell them that because they read Man's Search for Meaning, one of his many books. It's not the only book he wrote, but it has this personal story, which when I first read the book and I was 19 years old, I thought this was Grandpa. How could he have gone through this and be that person that I know who's so in love with life and enjoying life? And then I realized that was really what he would say. This is what we humans can do. We can go through challenging time. We can go through suffering, and we can come out the other end. He had PTSD and all the things you would expect, but it didn't dominate his life. He wasn't a broken man who would look back and hate humankind, although he would have had a good reason to do so. And you wouldn't blame anybody who would go through such experiences and become that. But it was in accordance with what he also aimed for as a psychotherapist, something he had just discovered before the Holocaust, which was the goal of good therapy shouldn't be to make people just feel good, but it should be to strengthen them and to enable them to be prepared and to be able to endure suffering of any kind, as we all suffer sooner or later. That it comes with life, but we don't have to automatically assume that every kind of suffering creates despair. Despair is, he would say, suffering without meaning. If you can't find some perspective of meaning in what you have to endure, then it becomes a lot harder. And so according to him, that was his goal as a therapist, to make people able to endure difficult times and to go and immerse themselves fully in life. And I think because he managed to do that himself, he had credibility, and a lot of his patients would sense that, okay, well, if he could do this and if he can function normally and actually enjoy life, then maybe I can do it as well.
That's pretty hard-hitting stuff. when you know what he's gone through. Uh, yeah, and to hear what a character he was and how playful and living in the moment after what he went through, that's yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah.
And with with that growing up, did you find you also tried to kind of find meaning, or you were finding meaning in similar ways, or what was it
Well,
kind of like for you finding meaning, or dealing with suffering through life?
well, it's important to remember that what he um, described when he used the word meaning is not a self-made formula, sort of, a recipe of how to do it. Um, he used the term meaning not in a prescriptive way, but in a descriptive way. So he said it's part of humankind, whether you reflect upon that consciously or not, to be meaning oriented. And usually we are not concerned with the topic of meaning most of the time. Someone once compared this to breathing oxygen. Usually you don't think about it, you just breathe, right? But it's only when oxygen is lacking that you notice, okay, this is not good. I'm running out of air, so I need to find a place where I can get more air. And it's the same with meaning. So we usually don't reflect upon it, and that's good. We don't need to. You can be perfectly living a happy, healthy, and productive life without ever thinking about meaning. You don't need any Victor Frankl telling you about meaning. But oftentimes, because of the times that we live in, and that he already lived in 100 years ago, a lot of things were changing that still have kind of defined how we live today. Traditions have become options. They're no longer binding. He would say the drives and instincts no longer tell us what we have to do, and the traditions no longer tell us what we should do. And not knowing what we have to do or what we should do, we oftentimes don't even know what we want to do, and then can become troublesome. And that's actually not just in times of crisis when there are few options, but also in times of wealth and in good times when we have a lot of options and we can decide, okay, where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? What profession do I want to pick up? We make all these choices, and I mean, it should be a good thing, and it is a good thing that we have more choices than most people had in previous generations. But it seems that for a lot of people, this is overwhelming, and then they kind of take a step back and say, "Well, I don't know what to choose. It's so much. I don't even know where to go." And the question of meaning then becomes really a question that's kind of uncomfortable to deal with. But as the way he saw it was that that's nothing bad either. So asking that question, does my life have a meaning? What do I want to devote myself to? To which meaning? That is not a question that's a sign that there's anything wrong with you, which most other therapists and therapies would kind of diagnose from the distance. But he said, on the contrary, it's a sign that you're healthy, and it's actually a sign of maturity. You're in the same boat as the greatest thinkers that ever walked the planet, asking this question. So the question is not the problem. It's what we do as human beings. We ask these existential questions that go beyond just the emotional, how am I feeling, or the cognitive, but they go beyond that, the existential. Why am I here? What's the meaning of my life? What are the values that I want to stand up for and actualize in this world? And then pick and choose. And sometimes the problem becomes when we don't choose, or when we search and search and nothing comes on. And that's when logotherapy and logotherapists and he would step in and say, well, there are ways to help with that search. But it's never something that comes from him or the therapist. We're just catalysts. So we help every individual in their search. It has to be an individual who becomes aware of, these are the things that I could do, these are the things I want to do, and I go out and fulfill those meaningful tasks.
And to and and really interesting there that the meaning is just there. It's just kind of, it's when it's the absence, then we clock something.
Always there. Meaning, possibilities are always there. So he was talking about the very concrete, down to earth meaning in every situation. So you and I, we're having this conversation right now, right? We could be doing other things. I could be taking a walk, which can be meaningful, and to collect energy, right? I could do that, but it's probably not the most meaningful choice right now. So I make the choice of trying not to bore you. You make the choice of asking questions, so you get an understanding of the matter. So we always choose whether we do it consciously or not. And even if we'd say, oh, we'll just lean back and go into autopilot or do nothing, well, that's a choice as well.
There's meaning right here. There's the
But,
meaning is the value, the importance that we have here.
do with values, because I mean you have certain talents and interests, right? And so that this you choose to do this. So the meaning is has something to do with you. At the same time, it transcends you. So it's a little bit paradox, right? So meaning is there in this situation objectively. So Victor Frankl was never talking about subjective meaning, which sometimes people, they think that's what he meant. And he was always very clear that meaning is not something that we just create or fabricate ourselves. Because then, if you think that to the end, that would mean I could just say, well, it's meaningful to rob a bank, or it's meaningful for me to, I'm a leader of a country. It's meaningful for me to invade the country next door because they got resources, and I'll just have access to those resources. It's meaningful for me, and therefore it is meaningful. No, it's not something we decide on. So it's objectively in that situation, and it needs to be found. And one story to draw a good image to remember is the story of a student who came up to my grandfather's before a lecture once, and he said, Dr. Frankl, I don't have time to listen to your lecture. Could you just tell me what the meaning of life is really quickly? And of course he would laugh, and he would say, well, this is a good example for how to explain this. If you were to ask the best chess player in the world, at the time it was Kasparov, I believe, what's the best move? He would say, well, he or she would say, or it actually is probably ChatGPT by now. It would tell you, well, you can't just say that's or this or that is the best move. It always depends on the many, many factors that you have to put in the equation of where's the game at? Who are the players? What are their strategies? There's a million factors. And if you put them all into an equation, which a computer can do very well, then you can say, well, with 99.9% certainty, this or that is the best move in this situation. So it is there, it is inherent in that situation. We don't bring it in there, but it is the best chess move in that situation. It's the same with meaning. So there is a best choice in every situation, but we never know 100% for sure if we've made the best choice. We can make really bad choices, and we can feel that it was highly meaningful, and we can make pretty good choices and yet feel that it wasn't so meaningful. It's not dependent on our feelings either. For example, I like to think of Van Gogh, the painter, right? So as far as we know, he didn't sell a single picture in his lifetime. And he might have thought at the end of his life, I should have done something else with my life. It was meaningful. I wasted my time painting. I could have done other things. This was not successful, right? And yet now, who would say now that Van Gogh's life and contribution to the world of art, and he keeps inspiring millions of people, that was meaningless? It was not. And so you can do very meaningful things, and you don't have that sense of meaning. It's not about a sense. It's not us putting it there, but it is an objective quality, and we have to find it. And that's the constant search for meaning, and that included him. That includes me. So I'm no different. This is what we do as humans And yeah, and sometimes we make bad choices and then we become guilty. And when we make good choices, then it's an achievement, and we know it. And we don't have to do what a lot of other therapies and therapists did at the time, and unfortunately still do today, which is to say, oh, well, whatever your choices are, that's not really your responsibility, because they're not really your choices in the first place, because yours is just a subject of influences that have been put there. There are people who say everything can be reduced down to the genes that are acting within your system, and your all your actions are determined by those genes. And others say, well, it's just what you learned and unlearned, and relearned, and that just determines everything you do. Now, not that's not to say that those factors don't exist. And it's not to say that they don't have a big influence on our actions. Of course they do. Or the subconscious, the depth psychology. It would be stupid to deny that, but it's not the whole story. So the generalization to say all these influences are just determining our actions, our beliefs, is simply not true. To be a human being is more complex. And Frankl used the phrase, the Latin phrase "tertium datur," which means there's a third element there, and that's the choices that we make, and we are free to make these choices. He was very clear about that we are not determined in our choices, and we can choose: will I act in accordance with perhaps my psychological imprints, or my needs that come from my genetic disposition, or am I going to go against them? Only a human being can do that. I can say I will not allow my need to be the priority right now, and I'll go and do a different thing. I'll go against that. Only human beings can go into hunger strike, for example, and say, for this or that goal and idea and meaningful task, or meaningful value in the world, I will even give up my own life. We have that choice, we have that freedom. And that's what he emphasized on in a time when he was ridiculed for that, when the predominant assumption was that human beings are basically can be reduced to either just their psychodynamic processes, or their learned behaviors, or their genes.
The behaviorist Skinner, yeah, fascinating. And what was his thoughts then on if we're stuck? So we've got this meaning; it's here, it's all around us. It's changing from moment to moment. We can find meaning when maybe our behaviorists would say, X and Y equals such and such, but we do something else. We do what kind of inside. But what would Victor, what would yourself, what would you as yourself as a therapist say is the reason that people would get stuck finding their meaning? What gets in the way of being in touch with the values, your meaning in the moment? Like you said, getting in tune with what's going to be important to us with this meeting. What would get in the
Well,
way?
it's a good question. Yeah, it's a very good question. There can be many, many reasons. So you have to look at the individual case. Now, someone who's asking, does my life have a meaning or not? You don't have to necessarily assume that they are depressed. But of course, that can be a symptom of depression too. So you always have to look at the whole picture, and make a good diagnosis, and look at all the what we in logotherapy call dimensions of human existence. And that means there is the physical level, which is driven by all the functions in our body, and which is where genes express themselves. So some people get depressions and it's in their genes. There's nothing they can do about it, or not much. Then there is the cognition and emotion, and that is to a large part what we learned and unlearned, and also subject to the influences from the physical. So all these connections exist, and a depression can have a physical cause. A depression can have a lifestyle cause. It can be bad behavior that we learn, and that's not ideal, and that can be relearned. And behavior therapy is great for that. But then there's a third dimension, and that's what he called the noetic dimension. And this is where the existential questions and the questions of meaning, they become central. And that's usually out of the equation, right? And so that's also where we have our free will, and we have something that's orienting to us, that's helping us in the search for meaning, and that's our conscience, our human conscience. That will be something that's not affected by any disorders in the psychological, in the cognitive, or even in the physical. So true conscience, Frankl would say, begins where all these influences end. And then that helps us. It's like a compass. So in every situation, it's our conscience that tells us, well, maybe this is the good direction to go. And oftentimes, I mean, not always, but oftentimes that's not the comfortable way, right? So when we go after, okay, well, this is more comfortable, this is more safe, or those are questions. That's our emotional, cognitive dimension or physical dimension, right? I'm tired. I want to go home. I want to stay in bed. Those influences come from there, but our conscience will always direct us in the good direction of, this is something meaningful, this is something that needs to be done, or that should be done, and that can be done, and you're the person who can do that. So meaning fulfillment is not, we're not fulfilling meaning for ourselves, at least not only for ourselves, but meaning is what wants to be fulfilled for the sake of itself, something that is important, and we can do that. And then we oftentimes also feel good about it if we've done it, and if it's done. And even if it doesn't succeed, it makes us resilient against setbacks, because going and pursuing a meaningful task and not reaching it, that doesn't render our attempt meaningless. So we know we did the right thing. Every emergency responder who goes to, I don't know, the scene of an accident, for example, right? Sometimes they try to help the people there, and sometimes there are casualties, and there's nothing they can do. But that doesn't render their attempt meaningless. They will go out the next day and try again. And so our intentions, human being is an intentional being. So it's not so much about the effects, but our intentions. Where do we go? What are the tasks that we fulfill? And by the way, tasks, it's not just tasks, but it can be another person. And that's when we talk about love. So to be there and to be good for an important task, for a good cause, or for someone, to be there for that person. And when we're stuck, sometimes it's that we don't see what's the most meaningful task, and then we say, okay, I don't know, or that we are afraid that if we make a choice and maybe it turns out that was not a good choice. We can always only act by knowledge, to the best of our conscience and to the best of our knowledge, right? And that is limited, just like everything else is we're human beings, we're flawed, and even the conscience can be wrong, right? And then we might find out, okay, I made a bad choice, and now I'm guilty because of maybe the consequences that come from those actions. And guilt can be a very uncomfortable thing. It's not a good feeling that it creates. And so sometimes we shy away from assuming the responsibility, and we don't do what we know would be necessary, it would be the best choice, because we fear the consequences for ourselves. And that's why it's so important to remind people that ultimately we should not be too much concerned with the consequences and even with our feelings. I know this sounds crazy coming from a psychotherapist, because we're all about feelings, and how do you feel, and what's going on inside of you, and how does this or that feel. Well, logotherapy is a little bit different. It's very counter to the mainstream in that respect. That doesn't mean feelings aren't important. They are, but they're not everything. And there's more to life than just feeling good or pursuing good feelings. Pursuing meaning doesn't mean that you're automatically going to feel good all the time. But as Frankl put it, that's not even healthy, or a healthy wish even. Already, it has a kind of a neurotic flavor to it, saying, oh, I just want to, this or that feels good to me. So, and I want those good feelings. So I don't really care about the quality of my goals or the tasks or whether or not this is important to the world, as long as the consequences are that I'm going to feel good. This is not a healthy human being. This is neurotic. And the less we think about those consequences and the more we keep our eyes on this is meaningful, this is important, or this is the person that I want to be there for, the less we are concerned with ourselves, the more we overlook ourselves. Doesn't mean neglect ourselves, but overlook ourselves in a healthy way, the better we're off.
A lot to take in, but that third dimension being really important, and us as almost seeing it from above ourselves. It sounded like there almost.
Absolutely right.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
Very good. Exactly. To remove ourselves a step from ourselves. Again, this is something that's a human potential and quality. It's something that we can take a step aside and say, I look at myself in this situation from a different angle, and I don't just have to. In psychoanalysis would be app reacting, right? And in behaviorists, it would be reacting, but I can act. I can choose freely what to put into this world, what shall happen through me and through my actions and through my being in this life and in this world. And we're free to choose that. And I mean, that it sounds so simple, but you hear a lot of people still applying this kind of kitchen psychology, that say, well, okay, well, this guy, he became a murderer or a thief, and he never received much love, and therefore he couldn't give much love. And this is so destructive, and it's so untrue. A lot of people didn't receive much love or had very difficult upbringing, right? And they say, well, not just in spite, but because of that, I want to do it differently. And I want to be a loving person. And I want to be trusting other people because I know from firsthand experience what it means like not to be raised in a loving environment. But those are usually not the people you'll read up in the newspapers, right? But whenever something goes wrong, then all the therapists and people and journalists and they go, well, of course, we looked at his life history and we can explain everything because, well, it didn't get much love. So it just had to let the hatred out, unfiltered and undirected against someone. That's it might be true for animals, and I love animals. I have a cat, and when she's angry, she'll bite me, and that's not a reaction she can control. But we as human beings, we can still decide, what am I going to do with my anger? What am I going to do with my PTSD? What am I going to do with all the things that are in me that I could? And there's this saying, "Become who you are," right? Well, Frankl would protest. He would object to this. Become who you can be or who you should be. Who you should be. That should be an element too, because you might have a great you might become a great thief or dictator or murderer, right? Is that a potential you should and you want to cultivate? So we make the choices, and we always have that freedom, even if it's difficult, and even if the degree of freedom is very limited, say by other factors, mental disease, for example, schizophrenia, addiction, right? It might be a very, very narrow region of where we have that choice. But even there, we can see that, we can recognize it, and we can emphasize that and work with that.
The very common difference between the hero and the villain. The hero decides to then make sure no one hurts like they did, and the villain wants to punish the world in the way they were punished.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And choice, you can choose whether you want to be the villain or the good guy. But talking away this responsibility, even when people are told, oh, well, you did this and that and you were a criminal, and they did that. A lot of psychology was, and I think to some extent still is. He often talked in prisons, and he talked in San Quentin prison. And the first, when he first talked, only a few people came, and then they re-invited him, and they said the first time we didn't come because we have this psychoanalyst coming once a month from San Francisco, and he's telling us, well, it's not your fault, it's all your upbringing, it's all you know the circumstances that you grew up in. So don't worry, you're not guilty. And they said, well, this is like a millstone around our neck because we know we're guilty. And to take away this freedom of choice that we had and that we know that we had is dehumanizing. It's not helping. It's not making us feel better, which was obviously the intention. It's making us feel worse because that would mean you're not seeing as like few full human beings. And so he had a different message. He went in and said, "Yeah, you were guilty, and you became guilty. You had freedom, and with that freedom comes responsibility. And you chose to do something that would take away the freedom. Now you're left with only the responsibility. But there are still ways how to deal with that, and there's still you can still grow as a human being, and there's still options there because." It's part of human existence to become guilty. We all become guilty sooner or later because of that freedom that we have. When a cat kills a mouse, nobody would say the cat is guilty of murder. It was made a choice there. It acted out an instinct. But when we as humans kill an animal, we have to justify that and have good reason to present for that. And so, because we have the choice, it comes with the package that we have to suffer. We have to accept the existence of guilt, and that we all become guilty. And the third one is death. So these are kind of the three, call them the tragic triad of life. We can't work around them, and they are part of human existence. And that's usually when the question of meaning comes up. Now that I'm guilty, what's the meaning of my life? Now that I'm suffering, what is the meaning of my life? And now that I know that I might die soon, or somebody died who I loved, what's the meaning of it all?
Very, very, again, hard-hitting stuff, but true and important. And I think that's from reading the books I've got me about everyone watching. I'm going to put these in the still got the pen in. But yeah, I'm going to put these below. But and I'm also going to link your film with Victor. But personally, I found it's been absolutely amazing working with people myself and in trauma work. I found there was something kind of sometimes missing at the end of sessions, sometimes not quite getting it. Kind of, yeah, okay, we've gone and addressed something, but now what? Now what?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's what I was kind of picking up in the book, and what I'm hearing here as well. And what's really important, then what's your role then? What are your values? What if you could see yourself top down? What role do you want to play, and what does the world ask of you to play? What and that seems to be the missing piece, like you said, the third dimension.
What does the world ask you? That's Frankl used to say, it's not about what we expect from life, but what life expects from us. So how do we answer? And a lot of times life throws things in our way. We all know that we didn't choose. Someone once made this analogy to school, right? The teacher's asking a question, so he's doing a test, and not every kid gets the easy questions. Some kid will be unlucky and will get the difficult question, right? But we wouldn't judge the kid by the question that's asked from it, but by the answer it gives. So how do you respond? And how do you respond to good situations? That's important too. What do you do? What's your responsibility? What are you making out of the many possibilities that you have? Are you making good choices with that? And some people do that, and other people don't. And other people face very difficult situations in life, for which they have they haven't created those, right? They haven't chosen those. And some respond in very beautiful ways and are able to find something meaningful in it, and to pass that on and to make it not just about themselves and their feelings, but about a bigger meaning. And that can always be done. There are always meaning possibilities in every situation if you look hard enough.
Finding meaning can be really important at the end of that kind of work, because someone needs can't just kind of process the past. They then got to look forward and what's their meaning, which sounds like logotherapy has that part of the third dimension.
Yeah, the orientation. Frankly, used to say human existence is always directed beyond itself. So, when we're in a healthy state, you also call it self-transcendence. We transcend ourselves onto meaningful tasks, other people, not towards our own feelings, not towards the past. I mean, there are times when that is helpful, of course. There are times when we need to look at ourselves and our programs, so to speak, that are running, and if some of them are not good, what can we do about them? And there are a lot of tools that have been developed by so many approaches, and they're all helpful to deal with the psychophysical aspects. But then the question becomes, okay, well, now that that's done, or now that I maybe have found a new attitude, how to deal with that if it can't be really changed. Well, then what? And then we have to help people find the way back into life again, and to take their gaze off of their own belly button or of the past, right? And go open up again, widen the view, if you like, towards, okay, what is meaningful now? What's the demand of the hour, so to speak, and which direction am I going to go now? What am I going to get involved in, with what task or what people? So the self-transcendent element, again, an easy picture to kind of get the concept is his comparison with the human eye. And he would say, when is the human eye perceiving something of itself? When it's healthy? No, unless you're looking into a mirror, you're not able to see yourself. The eye is not built to perceive itself. When it does, it's usually a problem. It's a cataract or something wrong with the retina or whatever, and you need to get it fixed. And he would say that's the same with a human being. Normally, in a healthy state, we are actually not so much concerned in looking at and perceiving ourselves, but we're perceiving the world and what's in there and who's in there, and we're directed towards those things. And there's time for self-reflection, but then and it's meaningful to self-reflect, but then there's a time again to let that go, to put that behind oneself, and to redirect oneself towards the world.
Reorientate. Yeah. I'm so appreciative of your time. Absolutely, yeah, been lovely to really hear about this, and some amazing teachings, and I've definitely taken something away. So I hope people, how they've also been on that journey with me and taken something. For your own work at the moment, though, so that my kind of viewers can see what kind of you're kind of doing at the moment, if people wanted to follow or kind of see a bit more about logotherapy, what would be your advice to the people watching if they wanted to see a bit more of your work in film or psychotherapy, or more about logotherapy? What would you say? How could they get in? How could they see more?
Well, anybody is interested in Victor Frankl. I did do a documentary. He was my grandfather, so I had a lot of access to people who knew him, who worked with him, who were his students, who were his friends. And about 10 years ago, I took my camera and interviewed many people who had worked with him. And the result of that is my documentary called Victor and I. And it's available on Vimeo. You can find it there. There are other projects, there are film projects that I'm still involved with right now that also have the topic of meaning in them somewhere. And I do teach logotherapy. There is a course available at our institute in California, which is called the Victor Frankl Institute of America, VFIA. There's a little course, kind of an introductory course for logotherapy. You don't have to be a therapist. Everybody can look into that. And what's new is this year, for the first time, we have rolled out intensive full curriculum training in logotherapy online by the so-called Elizabeth Lucas Archive. And that's where I was trained. I'm a pupil. I had to learn logotherapy just like everybody else. And it was Victor Frankl's student, Elizabeth Lucas, who was his closest student, and she did something remarkable by taking his body of work and making it teachable. So she was my teacher, and now we're putting all this content into a comprehensive online course that's more geared towards professionals, people in the helping professions. 5 semesters, and it's a course where it's all in there, and the tests are not so easy. So people fail the test sometimes, but we're trying to put really the logotherapy in its original form out there for people to have access to it. So these are the main projects that are going on right now.
Very exciting, and it's really hard to comprehend that Victor himself he had his own kind of theories all written down, didn't he? And he kept those in his head through the concentration camp. That was part of the meaning, was getting this all down, and now 100 years later, we've got his therapy, his teachings. It's just such an amazing journey to get here.
I think
Yeah.
you're right. We're lucky that it didn't get lost. So, I mean, he came up with these things. He was a student of Freud and then of Adler, and then he wanted to add this noetic dimension. And said, wait, it's not all just about, the things that we can't influence. And they didn't like that. Adler kicked him out. And he said, kind of, he wasn't aiming for that, but he just thought, well, I'll have to give it a name and make a system out of it. And that's how logotherapy was born about 100 years ago, in 1926. And he went on to refine it and to learn mainly from his patients and to see what made the difference, especially in critical, life-threatening situations and severe cases. And he could see that it was about meaning, which, I mean, it sounds, again, so simple. And today there's a lot of more talk about meaning, but back then there was nothing. I mean, meaning was always a topic. It's been around forever in all world religions and poetry and in music, but for some reason it was kind of overlooked in psychology and psychotherapy, and he wanted to change that. Luckily, he got to write his books. He wrote 33 books on the topic and kind of laid the foundation for others to take it and learn and apply it in whatever way and whatever personal style they want to.
Well, anyone who wants to see this, I'm going to put all the links below. I didn't know there were 33 books. I've made it through 2 excellent books, absolutely amazing. I honestly, I'm slightly dyslexic, so for me it takes quite a lot. I still raced through that.
It's a great book.
I was,
Well, I could recommend also the books by Elizabeth Lucas. Actually,
okay.
They contain a lot of actual case studies where you would see logotherapy in action. Which might be.
Well, I'll put the links below. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please, everyone, do check out the links below. Have a look at the film on, is it Vimeo? I don't know the name of is it Vimeo?
Yeah, that's on Vimeo, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Vimeo, okay.
Victor and I.
And check out the books. But yeah, been an absolute pleasure. Good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
You too.